Factorio we play a lot of. It's like designing a factory and survival game, but it's not a factory. It's like out in the wild. It's very machiney. So if you sort of like Minecraft, it's like a bit more grown-up version of that, I guess.
Her story I find really interesting. That's a really, really fantastic game. Firewatch, I don't know if that's recent enough. That's absolutely brilliant. Really, really interesting kind of experience and like very different story than a lot of games have.
I've got a really soft spot for the Spiderweb software games. It's mostly one chap who's been making them for decades, and they're very lo-fi, like very simple graphics, barely any animation, but he just puts pages and pages and pages of writing in them.
Night in the Woods. Night in the Woods is absolutely brilliant. Hellblade is a really interesting kind of, it's not AAA, it feels like it's AAA, but it's not. It's actually like a relatively small team made that.
Return of the Obra Dinn, which is all about a murder mystery on a pirate ship. Very cool. If you want something that's very silly and amazing, Crypt of the Necrodancer, again, spooky theme, good for Halloween, and you essentially have to like dungeon crawl to a disco beat.
My favourite games are things like Journey for PlayStation. That's a game that just totally changed the way I look at games and the experiences they can give me, and it was a big source of inspiration for the Alto series. Everybody's Gone to the Rapture is a game for PlayStation as well. It's made here in the UK. Beautiful, immersive, narrative-based game set in sort of a Shropshire village in the UK. So again, it felt very much like, it felt extra immersive in the sense that it was like, oh, this is a place that feels familiar, it feels like home, but it's also got this kind of sinister plot, which is very engaging. The Witness, which is a sort of puzzle game that's set on this beautiful island. It's got great art style, but it's very cerebral and gives you certain realizations and changes your perspective on the world that you're looking at in very interesting ways. And it's sort of almost the narrative that the game tells takes place in your own mind, and it's your own realizations and your own sense of progression that is the real kind of story.
I will always say Life is Strange. Any of the Life is Strange games are just absolutely brilliant, and they're the kind of games that I want to see 10 times over. Just like that kind of story, that kind of content, the characters, everything's brilliant.
It is a Lovecraftian card game where you tell the story of founding a cult and ending the world, which is, you know, what you want to do. And it's all done through a card system. So you start with a bunch of different cards which have different resources on them, and you combine them together to unlock different bits of the story and also unlock different cards and resources to help you build your story further.
So the one that we just released was Smash It Plunder, that came out on the 5th of October, and that's a PlayStation VR game where you have to run around the dungeon, smash the place up, looking for the treasure before the time limit ends. It's got local multiplayer, so people can join in actually on the TV screen, and everyone can play with or against each other. So it's quite unlike any other VR game, because VR can normally be seen as quite antisocial, because you are putting someone away. We've actually sort of broken it out, and it's a very, very playful game. Very light-hearted and quite a technical achievement.
So Monument Valley 2 is the sequel to Monument Valley. So it's still a game. It's about impossible architecture and geometry and these really beautiful kind of monuments that you're exploring. So the game is about this two characters, Ro, who is a mother, and her child. And she's kind of going through this sequence of buildings, trying to teach her daughter about the world.
The Alto games are mobile, endless runner games. So in Alto's Adventure, you're snowboarding, Odyssey, you're sandboarding, but the mechanic is similar. It's you're kind of moving through this procedurally generated landscape. But it has this sort of fluid gameplay. It's very much about this sort of kinesthetic movement. It's something that you can kind of tune out and get into the zone. The real thing that sets it apart that we really strive for was to hopefully have it feel like almost like a real world, and it's a sort of self-contained space. Like you can escape to this place, and it has its real kind of day and night cycle. There's weather that comes and goes. The sounds are aimed to be very immersive, and the music all ties that together.
Wonder Woman game. I think, well, I mean, there's lots of brilliant kind of superhero games, and it's like the movie genre is huge, and Wonder Woman, the movie, it was huge. It's absolutely massive. But there's things you can get from games about like making choices and interacting with things and like feeling empowered because you get to do something as opposed to just watch something happen.
I love Blade Runner. but I would do some, I don't know, some niche, like you're not even a big player in it. You're set in a cool cyberpunk world, but it's a narrative game about being a cyberpunk rat.
I mean, I'm involved in all aspects of games. We have a very small team, so I kind of, day to day, I'm sort of splitting my time between art and design and programming. One day I might be working on something very creative, very visual, and the next day I'm working on something that's maybe more technical or architectural.
Actually, it's a real mix between technical and like logical, and at the same time like the super creative and like artsy thing that like a lot of film and TV producers are having to do. So it is quite enjoyable having to like do that sort of mixture.
So being a producer, you kind of have fingers in every pie, really. So especially in a small studio like ours, you're kind of working with every different discipline. You're working with artists and programmers, designers, and just kind of making sure that everyone's working really effectively together and that the vision of the game is kind of coming together as it should.
My background is in art and design. I went to university to study illustration, and I worked as a freelance illustrator and designer for several years. I always, in the back of my mind, had the idea that I'd want to work in games one day, but I think I got a taste for kind of commercial arts as a whole, which was, I think, a really good foundation to build on. It meant I sort of got to try a lot of different things, work with different clients, and ultimately then making the jump to games, which I eventually did, I felt like I had a sort of a broader base to build on and a broader understanding of sort of design principles.
I was very much like an arts person. I don't have any coding experience, you know, I'm not a traditional gamer, but I did obviously play games when I was growing up. And I got out of uni and thought, actually, the only thing that my degree equips me for is to be a teacher, which I didn't want to do. So I kind of looked around and suddenly games like reared its head and says, you know, I'm the nexus between technology, which is interesting, you know, big nerd, love tech, and it's also where art plays in as well, because you can't have a game that's just made purely with programming. You have to have a lot of creativity there too. So it seemed like a perfect place. And I think this is actually quite an established route for production, at least, because it's quite a generalist role. You get people who love games, who are interested, who haven't got a particular specialism. So I'm not a trained artist or a trained programmer, like I said. But production is basically about doing a little bit of everything and helping out wherever it's needed and making sure that everybody knows what they're doing at all times. So it's quite a good fit for somebody who doesn't fit the traditional role. And one of the great things about production is once you're there doing production, you get to learn actually how everything works. So it sets you up very well when you go on to found your own studio and do your own thing.
I think the first thing is anyone can just download the software that we use day to day. It's completely free. And you can download it and you can watch YouTube videos now of people teaching you how to make stuff. And you can start making things. We've had work experience in from the local secondary school, and these are like 14-year-olds that have made games already. It's so much different compared to when we were growing up. It's so accessible now. And the fact that even students now get actual programming taught at school is amazing.
The hardest thing is working out what you want to do. I think particularly now, like, we're expected to change our jobs, we're expected to like follow our dreams in a way that maybe generations previously kind of had a set path for them, and it was very hard to change. So I think the first thing is work out what you actually want to do. And then the second thing, if you want to do games, is just start going out to indie studios if you want to work in indie, and just say, hey, I'm here, I can help, what do you need? I can do whatever you need. And sometimes people won't have space for you because they need a specific person, and if you have totally changed what you want to do and you don't have the degree, you can't fit that role. But there's always someone somewhere in games who needs some help. So that was certainly the way I got in.
I still really enjoy when we've got something, we've made it, and it might still not be finished, but taking it out and seeing new players interact with it is really satisfying. Just
the sense of creativity. Like, it's such a, I would say games are one of the few sort of mediums where it involves every creative discipline. Like, it's visual, it's storytelling, it's technical, it's just the crossroad of so many creative things. And so when you're working on a game, you really feel like you're crafting this sort of, you know, this world, and you might be working on something very difficult, but actually the results, you get this kind of beautiful, playful kind of sort of result, and that's very encouraging.
This is definitely the biggest thing that I've ever won, so it feels fantastic. And my co-founder is actually a much more established game maker than myself. So normally a lot of the spotlight is on him, and he deserves it, he's amazing. But this is the first time that spotlight's been on me, which is a bit weird.
I guess I had like a pinch me 2 weeks, which is very painful. But when we released, so I went out to San Francisco for the release of Monument Valley 2, and we were at WWDC, which is like the big Apple conference. conference, and like they announced it on the stage, which was just absolutely bizarre, really, that you're sat in this room full of all the biggest sort of tech people in the world, and you're like, that's our game up on there. And then following that, there was this kind of whirlwind couple of weeks where we were doing a lot of press and things and just getting to travel around and talk about the game, which after about 18 months of developing it in like absolute secrecy was really surreal, just being able to be like, yes, okay, we can actually say this is the game that we made, and like be really excited about it and not have to downplay it anymore. I was really excited.